I grew up in a small town in the Ottawa Valley, and we didn't have many luxuries and community services were not vast. Eventually, and sort of out of the blue, it was announced that we were getting a library. I was 9 or 10, and I didn't really grasp how we could just instantly get a library as soon as the next weekend, but come that Saturday I got my answer. A big rigged truck towed in a large trailer, similar to a portable classroom, and inside it were all the books. Instant library, ready to go. This was quite an attraction in our humble village, and I would go every Saturday morning, soon building a friendly, chatty relationship with the librarian. The collection of books was not vast, and I had trouble finding things I liked, but eventually I found my holy grail. A large, hardcover book about the history of horror movies. It was called A Pictorial History of Horror Movies, and featured more information about the genre, from Edison and Méliès to the films of the 1970s, than my child brain could absorb without going into overload. I borrowed the book every week, always returning it on Saturday, and then making a good-natured attempt to browse the shelves before borrowing the book again, and again, and again. This went on for maybe 2 years, and I read that book from cover to cover more than any other book in my life before or since. One Saturday, the librarian asked me if I would leave the book and borrow something different. I asked why. She said other people might want to borrow the book. I said, "Do other people want to borrow the book?" She conceded that no, not to her knowledge, but she doubled down on her argument, explaining that the other library visitors don't even know about the book since they never got the chance to see it on the shelf. I grumbled, grasping the logic, and then she offered me a book that was a treasury of Canadian comic books. A safe bet, since I had mentioned to her my love for comics on many occasions. I wasn't happy about the arrangement, and to her credit, the librarian noticed this, so she offered me a deal. If no one borrowed the book that week, I could take it out the next Saturday and keep it as long as I wanted, and she would never make a fuss about it again. That was a long week. But street hockey and comics and toys and school and my steely resolve to be reunited with the book got me through. That Saturday, I raced to the library, nestled as it was behind the Legion Hall next to my grandparents' house. I couldn't wait to trade in that terrible comic anthology for the horror movie book. I pedaled my bike as fast as it would go, but when I got there was an empty space where the library had been. As quickly and as without warning as it had arrived, now it was gone. I learned later it was due to funding for the library being exhausted. But understanding that then would have been cold comfort to me, standing in that parking lot, staring at the empty space through the tears in my eyes, holding that stupid book I knew I would now own forever, and the irony not escaping me that had this happened a week earlier, or a week later, I would still to this day have my beloved copy of A Pictorial History of Horror Movies. A book that had such a profound impact on me that lasts to this day. A book that gave me an insight to the history of an art form I was understanding more and more every day. A book which is in no small part one of the reasons I can proudly say I love old movies. Hello, cinephiles! I'm Derek, and I love old movies. We've got Sam the sidekick here today.
Hello, welcome to our second episode.
Episode 2, as it were.
As it were, sir.
Yes, and since you are here, please don't be shy about hitting like.
And subscribe.
And share.
Especially share.
It's good to share.
So good.
But while you are doing that, hey, thanks for checking out our last episode. That was cool of you.
It was. Big shout out to our listeners and subscribers. We're really glad you enjoyed our look at Rope of Sand.
Actually.
Yes?
About that.
Yes.
I've still been thinking about that film.
Oh?
It's like this. I can think about it in one of two ways. I can judge it on its own merits, or I can consider it a cynical attempt to make a second Casablanca. It probably deserves the first option, but knowing that the second is actually the genesis of the film, I feel I cannot think about it at all without viewing it through this Casablanca lens.
I know what you mean. But it's not a fair comparison. Casablanca is a timeless classic, and...
Yeah, but you know why? Casablanca is great because everything means something. Everything builds upon something else. Every single character in the cast matters, and are interlocking pieces of this puzzle that forms an elaborate metaphor for the entrance of the United States into the Second World War. Casablanca is a parable, and expertly done.
Rope of Sand doesn't have any of that.
Exactly. In Rope of Sand, nothing means anything. The love story is cheap, so the love triangle is really cheap. The stakes are selfish. Diamonds, as opposed to selfless. And Rick Blaine is a surly anti-hero you can get behind in all the ways that Mike Davis isn't.
Rope of Sand isn't terrible, though. Like, in a vacuum, it's pretty entertaining.
Totally. In a vacuum. But outside that vacuum, the weight of its Casablanca connection really burdens it. I spent days just comparing the two in my head.
It's not a fair comparison.
I'm really regretting recommending people watch them together. I think that doing that as a viewing experience would really doom someone's chance of enjoying Rope of Sand.
Maybe not.
Maybe. Hey, you made a big step into the post-COVID world the other day.
I did.
Do tell.
I went to the movies. Like, I went to a theater and watched a film. It had been a while.
Right on. Okay, so what did you see?
Jungle Cruise.
Any good?
It was all right. Dwayne Johnson films are their own genre.
What were the precautions like? I know for some people, myself included, getting back out there is a bit tricky. It's been a year and a half of fear and anxiety related to COVID-19, and changing gears isn't an automatic thing.
So when you buy your ticket, it blocks out the seats around you, so you get the 2-meter buffer.
I like it.
Numbers are pretty reduced in the theater. I went to a 6 p.m. screening, and there were only about 20 people in there.
How are things in the lobby and snack area? Is it a big free-for-all, or...?
There's a roped-off section to line up for the snack area, and the place where you get your ticket scanned is actually right beside that area, instead of being over at the stairs. And there's a special sign for you to line up for specialized arranged times for the arcade area.
So you have to pre-arrange your arcade time?
Yeah, booked in advance, I guess.
Wow, that's great. Okay, moving on. So this week, we are getting our film noir on.
Really on.
So much on.
All the on.
And we're looking at the 1949 film Too Late for Tears, directed by Byron Haskin and starring Elizabeth Scott, Dan Duryea, and Don DeFore. A solid noir thriller with tension, shady characters, double dealing, and about the most heartless femme fatale one can imagine. Too Late for Tears is one heck of a watch, and we're going to tell you all about why. Let's start with director Byron Haskin. Haskin was a newspaper cartoonist who transitioned his career into a newsreel photographer, and then directing and doing special effects and cinematography for feature films. While his filmography as a director isn't filled with hits, there's a lot of interesting stuff there, like I Walk Alone from 1947, which we mentioned last week, starring Burt Lancaster,
Ugh, that guy.
Kirk Douglas, and Elizabeth Scott. He also directed War of the Worlds in 1953.
No big social panics over that one?
No, but you could see how his background as a newsreel photographer would tempt him to do this in the Orson Welles broadcast style.
Orson Welles is his own genre.
Oh, agreed. Pirate movies were also big for Haskins, and he directed Long John Silver in 1954 and 2 productions of Treasure Island, a feature film in 1950 and a Disney television version in 55. In the 1960s, he did a lot of television, including episodes of The Outer Limits and a pirate-themed episode of The New Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. One of his last films was the truly awful Robinson Crusoe on Mars from 1964.
So, quantify that.
How so?
Truly awful. How bad we talking here?
It is the Rope of Sand to Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, Casablanca.
Oof, say no more.
But now, his special effects work? Let's just say he worked on much more interesting films. High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart, The Seahawk with Errol Flynn, and Newt Rockne All-American with Pat O'Brien, and Arsenic and Old Lace with Cary Grant.
That all sounds a lot better.
And lest we leave our listeners thinking Haskins was some kind of hack, it's worth mentioning that he was a 4-time Oscar nominee, all for special effects. He won a special Oscar for pioneering the use of the triple-head projector, and won a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation for War of the Worlds.
That sounds a lot better. It doesn't really sound like he was as good a director as a special effects guy, though.
No, for sure. I'm surprised how many of his films I've seen, though, without really registering it.
Too Late for Tears was written by Roy Huggins, who had a long and interesting career as a screenwriter. Too Late for Tears was one of his early film scripts, which he adapted from his own magazine serial that had appeared in the Saturday Evening Post. Huggins wrote a number of hard-boiled pulpy thrillers in the 40s and early 50s, like Sealed Cargo, Gun Fury and 3 Hours to Kill.
Which features a revenge-driven cowboy with a lynching scar on his neck. And if this sounds vaguely familiar to Clint Eastwood fans, definitely check out Hang 'em High, if you haven't already.
Not written by Roy Huggins.
No. And that's because...
By the 50s, Huggins was pretty much a TV screenplay guy. And he was incredibly successful here, writing scripts for shows such as Cheyenne.
Starring Clint Walker, Posey from The Dirty Dozen.
Love Posey. Also, he is credited with creating Maverick.
Starring James Garner, the Scrounger from The Great Escape.
Handley. Love him too. Let's watch The Great Escape again.
Oh, deal. Do you remember the time we went and saw that at the big screen at Galaxy?
Oh yes, excellent.
So good.
It gets better. Huggins is the creator of the show The Fugitive and the co-creator of The Rockford Files.
Holy crap. Yeah, those are big credits. That's a big TV show in each of 3 decades, and all really different.
Huggins ended his career with 2 Primetime Emmy nominations, 2 Writers Guild of America nominations, and a Lifetime Achievement in Television award that he received in 1994.
Well, I guess so. You know, talking about Lifetime Achievement Awards and The Fugitive gets me thinking about Harrison Ford. How is he not a Lifetime Achievement Oscar Award kind of guy? Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Blade Runner, the Tom Clancy stuff, Witness, The Fugitive. I feel like this is the sort of recognition he deserves. There's a huge, diverse, really successful body of work here as an actor. I'd like to see him recognized by the big officials.
I could see it.
Let's get to the cast. Elizabeth Scott, only 27 when this film was made, and it was the 8th film of her career. She had already worked with stars such as Humphrey Bogart in Dead Reckoning, Burt Lancaster twice in I Walk Alone with Kirk Douglas, and in Desert Town with Mary Astor. She'd also worked with Dick Powell and Raymond Burr in Pitfall. Although a much smaller film with less star power, Too Late for Tears was considered by critics and fans to be her best performance and film. She appeared in films fairly regularly until 1954 before transitioning into television appearances, which were increasingly rare. Her unofficial retirement from the big screen was in 1957's Loving You, which most people will remember as Elvis Presley's second film, not Elizabeth Scott's last one. Truthfully, though, her actual last appearance was in 1972's Pulp with Michael Caine and Mickey Rooney. She passed away in 2015.
It seemed like she was poised to become a big star, then it just fizzled out. What happened?
Essentially, she just didn't become a big star. Not as big as Hal Wallace wanted anyway. Despite getting some pretty high-profile opportunities and big stars to work with, she wasn't growing in popularity. This led to Wallace not casting her in choice roles anymore, and Scott opting out of some films that she probably shouldn't have. When her contract with Paramount expired in 1954, it wasn't renewed, and she tried to essentially freelance herself. The result was an 18-year back end to her career that only ever went downhill.
That would have been a tough time to make it as a blonde, bombshell, femme fatale type in Hollywood. There were a lot of big names in exactly that mold.
And only so much room at the top. And her ceiling was pretty low compared to some of her contemporaries.
And she wasn't super popular with some directors, right?
Well, that comes with the territory when you're the producer's mistress.
Whoa, wait, what?
Yeah. Although it wasn't a big public thing, Kirk Douglas stated in one of his autobiographies that Elizabeth Scott was 100% Hal Wallace's mistress.
This is the same Hal Wallace who produced Rope of Sand.
Yeah.
And tried to get Corinne Calvet to be his mistress in exchange for being cast in that film.
Well, he was getting over Elizabeth Scott by then, so the timeline adds up.
Ugh, that's gross. He's gross.
Old Hollywood's Harvey Weinstein. Right there.
Yup. Elizabeth got her star, though, right? On the Walk of Fame?
Awarded in 1960. You can find it at 1624 Vine Street.
Good.
Now, Dan Duryea, he was a Cornell-educated advertising agent who had a heart attack in his late 20s, and the resulting health crisis led him to look for a less stressful line of work. So he got into acting, appearing in a few Broadway shows and then starring in the film version of The Little Foxes, which began his film career of playing slimy crooks, grifters, and all-around bad guys. Not one to opt for really sympathetic roles, Duryea was the sort of actor that played characters you knew were always headed to get their just desserts.
A guy you love to hate. A heel's heel.
Duryea appeared in an incredible amount of films in the 1940s, with 6 coming out in 1945 alone. A lot of his films were B-movies, or smaller productions, but he did appear in Pride of the Yankees in 1942, and Winchester 73 in 1950. By the mid-50s, he transitioned into television mostly, and appeared in many of the shows of the era, such as Magical World of Disney, Rawhide, and The Twilight Zone in various guest spots. He starred in 2 series as China Smith, and ended his career as a recurring role on Peyton Place before passing away in 1968 at the age of 61.
I love a good bad guy. Duryea has a great smirk, and one of those punchable faces. I want to see more with him.
You'd like him in Winchester 73. He's over the top, gleefully bad in that one.
I'm in. Does he have a star?
He does. Like Elizabeth Scott, he got his star in 1960, but unlike her, he got it for television, not film. He's at 6145 Hollywood Boulevard.
That's some primo real estate. Well done, Dan.
And lastly, we have Don DeFore.
That's 1940s Alec Baldwin lookalike Don DeFore, you mean?
Absolutely, I do. DeFore was an experienced stage actor, appearing both in touring shows and on Broadway before making the transition to film. He was largely a B-movie kind of guy, and usually cast in supporting roles, and without any major films on his resume.
None?
Literally nothing you've ever heard of. But television was more his thing, as DeFore became a regular on Ozzie and Harriet, as well as the show Hazel. He worked through the 70s and 80s, doing the obligatory guest star circuit, appearing on The Mod Squad, Love Boat, Marcus Welby, Fantasy Island, and more before his last credit, which was St. Elsewhere. DeFore's life was pretty incredible, though. He was president of the National Academy of the Television Arts and Sciences, and is pretty much responsible for the Emmy Awards being presented as a live television broadcast. He was great friends with Ronald Reagan, and none other than Judy Garland was the matron of honor at his wedding. He was also good friends with Walt Disney, and once lent Disney his own children to appear in a parade. DeFore wound up being given permission to open up his own restaurant, the Silver Banjo, at Frontierland at Disney in 1957.
He has to be a Walk of Fame guy.
6804 Hollywood Boulevard.
Can I just request we don't do any more movies that have lead actors named Dan and Dawn in them?
And they're both alliteratives?
Yes. I'd say it was some casting director's idea of a joke, but honestly, these guys are both so great in their roles, I'm not sure who else I'd cast anyway.
Well, we'll make a note. No more Dan and Dawn combos.
Unless these two made another film together.
Well, they barely made this one together, not really sharing any scenes nor exchanging any dialogue.
Bah.
However, they did appear in the Rock Hudson film Battle Hymn in 1957.
What's that one about?
The Korean War.
Put it on the list.
Done. Now, what's the rating story on Too Late for Tears?
So it only appears to be available on YouTube in Canada, and it has a 7.3 on IMDb.
Fair.
And over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is 63%, and the tomato meter is 100%. But there were only 5 reviewers.
All right. What about the awards?
The film won a Photoplay Award. This was one of the first American film fan magazines, for the best performances of the month, June. It was won by Elizabeth Scott and Dan Duryea in the film.
Best performance of the month.
Yeah.
Of the month.
What?
I don't know, just like Employee of the Month, film version.
I hope it was exactly like that.
Okay, hit us up with the blurb, Sam.
From IMDb. Through a fluke circumstance, a ruthless woman stumbles across a suitcase filled with $60,000 and is determined to hold on to it even if it means murder.
Oh, it'll mean murder.
Lots of murder.
And how? Now, there's not a lot of history to share about this film. Producer Hunt Stromberg borrowed Elizabeth Scott, Christine Miller, and Don DeFore from Hal Wallace for this production. In the days where actors had contracts that put them at the exclusive discretion of specific studios or producers, this sort of talent sharing was common. Stromberg originally wanted Joan Crawford to star, but she wanted too much money.
Well, sure. She was a big name.
And this doesn't come across like a film that had a budget for A-list actors. It was essentially an independent film, distributed by United Artists. The film was well reviewed at its time, with the New York Times calling it effective melodramatic elaboration of that theme. The theme being that money is the root of all evil. Despite an involved plot and an occasional overabundance of palaver, not all of which is bright, this yarn about a cash-hungry dame who doesn't let men or conscience stand in her way is an adult and generally suspenseful adventure. The film was re-released in 1955 under the title Killer Bait.
Awful title.
Pretty bad, yeah. Okay, we ready to do this thing?
Let's go.
We open on a lonely stretch of highway in the Hollywood Hills at night. A sedan pulls over. A second oncoming car carrying Jane, this is Elizabeth Scott, and Alan, they're just cruising in their convertible. Janie wants to go home rather than to their friend's house due to her sense of inferiority and jealousy. Ralph and Alice rub her nose in the fact that they have money, she thinks. They pass the sedan, which hits the road and tosses a case into the back of their car. When they inspect this odd happening, they find the case filled with cash. They are immediately then chased by another car, but Jane drives like a maniac and loses the pursuer. They get pulled over by a cop, who picks up on their nervousness. Jane pulls a gun.
Why do they have a gun? Was she really willing to shoot a policeman right there?
We'll never know, since they're allowed to leave. Now they head home, and they hide in their bedroom counting the cash.
$60,000. Well, $1949.
And what's that in today's cash?
According to the USinflationcalculator.com, just under $700,000.
That is a tidy windfall. Jane wants to keep it. Alan wants to ditch it or turn it over. Now, about their relationship. He's a good provider. She's not happy with not being rich.
Aw, poor little gold digger.
Kathy drops over. This is Alan's sister, and she lives across the hall. She notices immediately how weird they're being.
Okay. When Alan sees her, he actually says, "Greetings, Kathy." Who talks like that? They've been suspicious with the cop, with the dude in the parking garage, and now with the neighbor. They're super jumpy. The money has already gotten to them.
They make a deal to keep it for a week so they can think about what to do. They check the bag at a train station. Now, Jane clearly wants the cash. Alan always looks like he's going to be sick.
He's not made for crime.
Or being rich, clearly. The next day, Jane goes on a secret spending spree, hiding packages like fur coats around the apartment. And then there's another knock at the door.
Kathy?
Nope. Detective.
I don't think he's a detective.
This is Dan Durier's entrance. He is as suspicious as Jane and Alan are, and he explains that he wants to look around for a routine check. She tries to flirt with him, and then she lets him search.
He finds the packages, like, instantly.
And then blows his own cover, explaining that he's a crook and he wants the dough. She flirts more with him and denies she has the cash.
Then he rope of sands her right in the face. Just whack, whack, whack.
Is that a verb now?
Officially.
Jane says they gave the cash back, and Danny the crook seems to buy this and he leaves. By then, Alan comes home. He sees the coat. She's spent over $700 already, she admits.
Alan is not happy. They had a deal.
Alan wants to send the money to the district attorney, but Jane stands up to him and says she will take the money and run away before she lets him give it back. Alan knows the money is poison. He says it's changing her, and she flat out says this is the way she is, and this is the moment she's always wanted.
All I've ever wanted is to find a bag of stolen loot. It's been my dream since I was a little girl.
They talk about her previous husband, who she thought had money, but he didn't after all. And then he died. And
wait, did she kill him?
Well, everything in her tone of voice and facial expression scream, yes, she absolutely did. But she doesn't like talking about it.
Convenient.
Alan really wants to send the money back, but he suggests they go on a date first. Reenact their first date, dinner and a boat ride. But later, Alan leaves, and the cop,
the crook,
Danny Fuller, comes back. He didn't buy Jane's story, and he wants the cash.
As they banter back and forth, there's some incredible lines. Jane says to him, "What should I call you aside from stupid?" And he replies, "Stupid'll do as long as you don't bruise easy."
I guess you could say their flirtation is really in high swing. It's all day drinks and threats of violence at this point, and they make a deal to split the dough. But they will have to deal with Alan. Fuller agrees. He wants the money and the girl. They're super turned on by each other, but Fuller knows that she's dangerous.
She's more dangerous than he is. He just wants the money, and she's like, "Okay, but help me murder my husband." That escalated really quickly.
On the date, on the romantic little boat ride, Alan discovers that Jane has a gun with her, and she shoots him. Just like that.
Well, that solves the Alan problem.
Danny shows up expecting the money, and he sees dead Alan. He tries to nope out of there, but Jane threatens him, saying she will accuse him of the murder. And now he's stuck and has to help dispose of the body.
You can tell he isn't into the murdering stuff.
Jane rushes home, invites Kathy over for a drink so she has a witness when Alan doesn't come home.
Clever, clever.
And then it's back with Danny, and she drives him to the middle of nowhere to get the cash. He's pretty suspicious of her and takes off, but he's wearing Alan's coat, with the claim tag hidden in the liner.
This is a problem. For Jane.
Jane leaves her car to be stolen, to play up the Alan disappeared ruse, but then she tracks Danny down at his little hovel.
How? How did she just find him?
Jane explains that she wants the coat, to destroy any evidence of Alan, but this sets off Danny's spidey sense. He checks the coat over and finds the hole in the lining. He finds the claim check. No, wait. It's just a blank piece of cardboard.
Holy crap. Alan knew. He knew all along. He lied to her about the claim check being in his coat liner.
Meanwhile, Kathy is nosing around in Jane and Alan's apartment, going through their dresser and bathroom. She finds that the gun is missing, but that all of Alan's stuff is there, suggesting he hasn't just taken off and disappeared. And she finds the claim check.
Alan!
Just then the doorbell rings, and it's an old Air Force buddy of Alan's named Don Blake. This is Don DeFore. He's flirty and fun. He's quite curious, and Kathy tells him a bit too much about what's going on.
He's quite eager to help, and he doesn't like Jane. He thinks something is up with Jane's first husband dying. He and Kathy share a lot of info for people that just met.
Relationships move quickly here.
But Alan, clever, clever.
Back at the hovel, Danny flat out figures that Jane wants to kill him, so he's more interested in some hanky-panky, and Jane is down with this.
This isn't romantic. What is happening?
Fast guns, fast women.
He almost hit her. Again. Then they make out.
The two couples are in real juxtaposition to each other. Danny and Jane are all danger and risk and cruelty, and Don and Kathy are all trust and warmth. Anyway, after the tryst, Jane comes back home and tears the apartment apart, looking for the claim ticket.
That Kathy has. Take that, Jane.
Another knock on the door. This time, a homicide detective named Lieutenant Breach assigned to look for Alan.
It's Grand Central Station at this apartment. People are always dropping over.
Jane lies and gives a description of some girl that she alleges Alan was running around with.
Alibi creation 101.
Alan's car was found near the Mexican border, and the assumption is Alan ran for it. Kathy believes none of this. And then, here comes Don Blake.
Well, no one had dropped over in a while. It was time.
Don and Jane have a chat about Alan. She asks a lot of very specific questions, and Don gives very vague answers. They're both having a sus-off.
Almost like they're both hiding something.
Don leaves. Danny shows up. He wants the money. Jane is worried that Kathy knows too much, and she wants Danny to kill Kathy. He's really upset about this. Whatever else he is, he's not a killer.
Oh, you want the money? Sure, no problem. Let's kill my sister-in-law first, though, yeah?
Danny goes to buy poison. Don goes and drops in on Kathy, wanting to take her sleuthing.
Kathy and Don are adorable together and get their flirt on. She likes him, but she's on to him, suspecting he is up to something as well. He's damn charming, though.
Their love for Alan brings them together.
Indeed it does.
The next day, Danny comes over. He brought the poison for Kathy, but he's drunk and he's a mess. He is not cut out to be a murderer, and the stress of this entire situation is taking a heavy toll on him.
I'm not sure he's even cut out to be a crook at this point. He's a mess.
Now, a bunch happens in a hurry. Don invites Kathy to dinner, and she tells him about the claim ticket. Before they can go to the station, assuming that whatever has been placed in baggage there has to be related to Alan's disappearance, Jane shows up. She has found an actual old war buddy of Alan's who busts Don, and Don's cover is blown. Whoever he is, he's not an old war friend of Alan. Kathy wants the claim ticket back from him, and Jane pulls a gun. She clunks Don on the melon while Kathy runs for it and calls the police, and she tells the cops to wait for Jane.
Jane arrives at the station, and everyone seems sketchy and dangerous. She pays a rando $5 to collect her bag. But on the bag, Alan had left a note saying notify police if claimed by a woman. He knew. He knew what a nasty piece of work Jane was. That greedy, murdering gold digger.
Back at the apartment, Don admits to Kathy that he didn't know Alan at all, but he has unfinished business with Jane. And over at Danny's hovel, who shows up but Jane with the bag? He's not super happy to see her, but she says she needs a traveling companion, and she needs to know where the money came from. He says to her, "Don't ever change. I wouldn't like you with a heart." Danny tells the story of the loot. He had learned about a crooked insurance agent who was scamming his clients. Danny threatened to expose the guy and ruin his scam, so the $60,000 was hush money. It was a once-in-a-lifetime score.
A blackmailer? Wow. And he was blackmailing a jerk that probably deserved it. I feel a bit sorry for Danny now. He is in way over his head.
Jane puts the poison intended for Kathy into his drink, and Danny dies. Knowing the money is untraceable, Kathy heads for Mexico.
Guess she didn't need a companion after all.
Nope, she just needed to know the money was clean.
What a piece of work. She's so evil.
Danny's death is considered a suicide. Don seems to be working with the police at this point, and he knows that Danny was murdered, and Don is putting the whole thing together.
Breach doesn't buy Don's version of events. Who is Don, though? Not a cop, not a crook.
Jane heads to Mexico and begins living the high life at fancy hotels with thrilling and glamorous people, until one day, Don shows up. He wants the money. He tells her he found Alan's body, but let him drop back into the lake and didn't tell the cops. He wants half of everything she has left.
Except, here comes the twist. He faked her out and basically tricked her into admitting Alan was in the lake.
For Don, this whole thing has been a vendetta. He told the cops in Mexico she stole the money from him.
And his name isn't Blake, it's Blanchard. And he is the brother of her first husband. She did kill him.
Jane tries to get away and falls over the railing to the pavement below, dying instantly. The stolen money cascading on her body like snowflakes, as Don and Kathy plan a romantic honeymoon.
Wow. Wow. What an ending.
Right?
Let's do pros and cons right away.
Okay, my pros. Number 1, Elizabeth Scott is just over the top evil here. What a villain. As nasty and greedy and manipulative as they come. Number 2, Dan Duryea's performance that slowly crumbles from a hard-boiled gangster type to a man crippled by guilt over his involvement in murder. He was actually a more tragic character at the end than you would have expected from his first scene. And 3, for fans of old cars, there are some great scenes of old 40s era convertibles zooming through the Hollywood Hills. It's a nice extra treat in a film that doesn't really need it.
Okay, and the cons?
The score. The music wasn't great, just too overwrought and cheesy at all the wrong times. 2, there's almost too many characters, and everyone seems to be shady. It's a lot to keep track of. And 3, some of the dialogue feels as if it was lifted directly from the magazine version of the story. There are some things you can read off a page that seem fine, but sound weird when heard aloud. Some of the dialogue in the film is like that.
And is this a watch or a don't watch?
It's totally a watch. What are your thoughts?
Here are my pros. 1, Jane's pure villainy. The way she was able to go from being a cold-blooded murderer to being a charming flirt was awesome. Elizabeth Scott was perfect in this role. 2, Don DeFore's character. He was super sus, but he was very cool and funny. 3, Alan's planning ahead. I was impressed that he knew Jane wasn't trustworthy and he took precautions with the money. Now the cons. 1, the idea of anyone liking Jane. It's just totally unbelievable for me that as horrible, greedy, and evil as Jane was, that she managed to get married not once, but twice. 2, how quick people were to trust people. Both Jane and Catherine had these really sketchy guys show up in front of them, and they immediately trusted them. 3, how Jane was caught. She had been so smart and calculating throughout the entire film, so I found it a bit far-fetched that she got so scared and willing to give up the money when Don showed up at the end. She was in Mexico, so even if LA police wanted to arrest her, they wouldn't be able to do it while she was out of the country. So I wouldn't have expected her to give up her act so quickly.
Right on. Okay. And is this a watch or not?
Watch.
Okay, on our master list. Do you put this above or below Rope of Sand?
Above.
Yeah, me too. Okay, Too Late for Tears is our reigning champ.
Number 1 with a bullet.
So, that was episode 2.
It sure was.
And that's it for us.
It sure is.
We will see you next time. Episode 3 is taking us into monster movie territory with a deep cut from the Universal Horror catalog.
Can't wait, can't wait, can't wait.
So join us next time as we look close, real close, at Ghost of Frankenstein. But in the meantime, hit us up on the socials.
Yes, do that.
Get us at Facebook,
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
Instagram,
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
or drop us a line on the email,
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
at gmail.com, all one word.
And most importantly, as always, if you liked this episode, don't be shy about letting other people know. Tell your friends,
Tell your enemies.
especially them. You never know. It might help patch things up.
Right you are. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Sound effects used for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, come from freefx.co.uk. Images are found through the Creative Commons, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, comes from The Crux.